heart rate variability can be a major rabbit hole to go down for sure. I mean, I have exercise physiology background as well, but to keep it sort of superficial, give us a brief history and application as to why it's so important, and maybe give it context in terms of the listener who's stressed out, exhausted, burnt out, and then they heard this thing called HRV. Some people may never have heard of it, and then you have people that know very well in detail what it is, but kind of give us an overview on why that's probably the most important metric. And Biostrap has a couple of unique, I guess, monetary, not monopolizable, or just distinct qualities that makes their heart rate variability more sensitive.
Sure. Yeah, HRV is a really big one. It's something, HRV, I heard of it before I even joined Biostrap. And so I had started using it to kind of guide my own training. For the listeners out there that don't know what HRV is, it's pretty much, you have something like your heart rate, right, which is measured in beats per minute. And let's say that, just for an easy example, let's say that you're working out and you have your heart rate is 100 beats per minute. What that tells you that in 1 minute is that in 1 minute you had 100 heartbeats, right? But what heart rate variability tells you, and what heart rate variability is looking at, is pretty much, it's the measure of the difference in time intervals between heartbeats. So you pretty much have a heartbeat, and then you might have 10 milliseconds between the first heartbeat and the next heartbeat, but you might have a difference of another 20 milliseconds between that second heartbeat and the third heartbeat, and so on and so forth, for that 100 beats per minute. And what that's come to show is that pretty much a higher heart rate variability is better. And a lower heart rate variability is correlated with stress. It all has to do with the autonomic nervous system. That's kind of, what is understood as the main driver of, heart rate variability. And pretty much if you have a high heart rate variability, what that means is that your nervous system is much more ready to respond to stress. Kind of how I think about it on a very non-technical level is that if you are experiencing stressors throughout the day and your heartbeat is pretty consistent, that's kind of, you would think that consistent is better, right? But in regards to heart rate variability, if there's different stressors coming at you, you want your heart rate to sort of match that. If you have a lot of stress coming at you, your heart rate might be beating ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. Whereas, in a low stress environment, you might want it to be a little bit less variable. And so pretty much a higher variability, equates to better ability to adapt to the different stressors that come at you. And a stressor could be anything that your nervous system perceives, whether it's, a work call, whether it's this call that we're, this podcast that we're doing right now, whether it's some stress that's on your mind from, maybe an argument that you had before, whatever it may be. A big one is, stress that comes from, working out. And so all of those things affect HRV. A little bit about how Biostrap does HRV. Pretty much what we're looking at is, when we provide you an HRV value that you see in the app, and I'm sure that you've used it before, and some of your clients and study participants may have seen before, is that HRV value that you see in the app, you might be wondering, is that my HRV value right now? What is that from? Is that an average from my night's sleep? Well, Biostrap, we really believe that nocturnal biometric data is where you're going to be able to see the most insights. And that's because everyone sleeps, right? And when you're sleeping, pretty much from person to person, the processes that are happening in your body are consistent, across a general population. And so a really good way to look at how you're recovering and kind of judge your readiness for the day is to look at how well you recovered during your sleep. And so we're really looking at nocturnal HRV as opposed to HRV or biometrics during the daytime to kind of gauge how ready you are for the day. And so what we're doing is, you're wearing your Biostrap to sleep. Once we have programmed it to automatically recognize when you've entered a state of sleep. And so once you've entered a state of sleep, we're firing the PPG signals, infrared red light PPG signals, anywhere up to, you can get about 60 data points per minute. I believe what you have it set on right now, you're getting about 30 data points per minute. We're flashing that light once every 2 minutes. We're taking all of that data throughout the night's sleep. And then pretty much what we're doing is drawing a line of best fit through it. And the end point of that line is pretty much when you wake up. When you wake up, okay, you're ready to take on the day. What is your ending HRV value? That's pretty much the value that we're using to, push out a recovery score to you. It's the value that you see in the raw data that you see in your app. And we really believe that, taking longitudinal HRV values, HRV dependent on longitudinal data, is much more reflective of how ready you are to take on the day.
Awesome. So that sort of begs the question now, when you create your algorithm, because you have machine learning,
Mhm.
and one of the things that we teach our coaching clients is you don't want to compare it to absolute levels, right? Like Joe had this level of HRV and Mary had this. Everyone is unique,
Mhm.
and we want to make sure that we're comparing their HRV longitudinal markers from along the way to see how they're going above and below their standard scores. And then if, for example, they're doing proactive things that are therapeutic and they're going to bed earlier, or they're controlling their exposures to lights, or they're keeping a time restricted eating window, or they are making sure that they're getting lots of movement and so forth, and they're seeing the trends go up, they know that that's favorable, versus if they are doing things that aren't so aligned with their rhythms, that the heart rate variability will go down. And that's to your point of the lower the heart rate variability, the more they're under that autonomic nervous system of sympathetic dominance, and your catecholamines and your adrenaline hormones, neurotransmitters are being released, and it's creating a very steady beat. And some people get confused. It's like, well, my heart rate's high. Yeah, your heart rate's high, but the cadence between the beats are very controlled and very low.
Mhm.
And the ability to adapt, by definition, if I have the ability to adapt and address the environmental stressors, then that tells me I'm maintaining, have a higher capacity to maintain homeostasis. That's favorable. So I guess the question I would have to you is, how does the machine learning work, Brian, in terms of, okay, it takes some time to figure it out, and then once it does, it says, it gives you some scores, and what are those scores, and what kind of suggestions is it making? So first and foremost, I guess the question is, why does it take a little bit of time before it starts to give you your readings? I think, what is it, a 4-day or 5-day
5-day
window?
baseline.
Yeah, 5-day baseline. So what's going on in the number crunchers that are going on behind the scenes with that? Yeah.
Kind of back to what you said about, one person and another person's HRV scores being, you don't want to compare it to absolute values. This goes back to the conversation that we had during our onboarding call, where you asked, is there like a range of good or bad? And, really, with a lot of the studies that have been done, it's kind of, there's too much inter-subject variance, in these studies, meaning that heart rate variability can be up here for one person, down here for another person. And so it's really difficult to set like a normal range. And so with Biostrap, that's one thing that we really stress, is that the data that you are seeing is a comparison to your own baseline. And so that's why when you first get the Biostrap, we're not pushing out any sort of, recovery score, because the recovery score is, in its essence, it's algorithm generated, right? We're taking a bunch of inputs, weighting them, applying our logic to it, and giving you a recovery score. And so we can't do that if we don't have any sort of baseline data. I think this is a good kind of, little like tip or knowledge for people that are unfamiliar with wearables, is if you ever are using a sort of wearable that's pushing out any kind of insights or recovery scores to you before getting, at least 5 nights worth of data or some sort of baseline data, I would, certainly look twice into, whether that is accurate or not. You always want to have some sort of baseline, right? That's the reason why for clinical research studies, they do at least 2 weeks worth of baseline data, control data, before applying the intervention. Same principle applies to the algorithms that we do, is we want to get your baseline data first before we start applying logic to it and providing you with the score that you're pretty much using to make decisions about your health.
Hey there, I hope you're getting tremendous value out of our videos. If you are, make sure you like our videos, subscribe to our YouTube channel, turn on your alert buttons, and then check out the description below, because I have a free masterclass that will teach you how to 10x your energy levels in the next 12 weeks and finally end your energy and exhaustion nightmare.